There's a little town down in the PD where two slow rivers meet under the live oaks. It looks like the perfect place to grow old. Then those rivers came over their banks and went through nearly every house in town, twice in 2 years, and half the town never came back. That is number one and the worst of them. Because in South Carolina, what makes a town beautiful is usually what makes it hard to live in. The water that sells you the view is the water that floods the house. So we are counting down 10 of the prettiest towns in the state that turn out to be traps, and the catch hiding in each one. If you want the honest version before you buy, subscribe and stick with me. Number 10 is Walterboro, what they call the front porch of the Lowcountry. It's a charming old town an hour west of Charleston, with a downtown full of antique shops and a cypress swamp boardwalk where you can walk a long while and never see a car. For a slow retirement, it looks close to perfect, and it's the gentlest catch on the list, which is exactly why we open with it. Walterboro mostly lives off the interstate that runs past it. The jobs are thin, the summers are long and heavy, and the July bugs will test you in a way no brochure mentions. It's got a hospital right in town, so help is close. But the next town has the opposite problem. It's gorgeous, and almost nobody who lives there can afford to stay. Number 9 sits on the ocean, 15 minutes from Charleston. Folly Beach, what the locals call the edge of America. There's the fishing pier, the laid-back main street, the old lighthouse out alone in the water. It's the whole beach retirement dream, and that's exactly the problem. A typical home on Folly now goes for more than $1 million, which prices out just about every retiree who loved the place. So many houses became weekly rentals that the year-round neighbors started disappearing, until the people who actually lived there voted to cap them, just to keep the place from becoming a hotel. You can visit Folly the rest of your life. Actually living there is a whole different, pricier story. The next town will barely cost you a thing, and that's the warning sign. Number 8 takes us back inland to a town that calls itself the prettiest town in Dixie. Cheraw earned it. It has one of the oldest historic districts in the state, a white clapboard church from before the Revolution, and streets that time mostly pass by. The catch here is slower and sadder than any hurricane. The work left, the young people followed it the way they have all over the rural PD, and what is left is a town quietly getting older. Cheraw kept its hospital, which matters more here than almost anything, but you would be retiring into a town that is gently emptying out. The next one did not empty out slowly. Its whole reason for existing just died. Number 7 is Georgetown, the third oldest city in South Carolina, and from the water, it's hard to beat. A riverfront of old brick storefronts and working shrimp boats, with centuries of low country and gullah history in every block. For generations, it was a working town too, and that's where the trouble starts. Georgetown leaned on 2 big employers, a paper mill and a steel mill, and in the last couple of years, both shut down, pulling more than 600 jobs out of a town of 8,000. There's talk of remaking the old mill sites, but talk isn't a paycheck, and the town's smaller and poorer than a generation ago. It's still got its hospital, but you'd be moving into a town still figuring out what it is now that the work's gone. The next town is so far out that the view is almost beside the point. About an hour up the coast from Charleston, half swallowed by pine forest, is number 6, McClellanville. It's a tiny shrimping village on a tidal creek, the boats tied up at the docks, wild, empty barrier islands just offshore. There's hardly a more peaceful spot on the whole Carolina coast, but peace this far out has a price, and McClellanville already paid it once. When Hurricane Hugo came ashore here, it drove a wall of water some 20 feet high straight through the village. More than 1,000 people had sheltered in the local school, and the water climbed almost to the ceiling around them in the dark. They survived by inches. On an ordinary day, this place is paradise, but the nearest real emergency room is the better part of an hour away, and when something goes wrong, a storm, a heart attack, an hour is a long time. Which brings us to the heart of this list, and the one town I find hardest to talk about. Number 5 is St. Helena Island, and it's beautiful in a way that goes deeper than scenery. This is the heart of Gullah country, the sea island culture descended from enslaved Africans who kept their own language and way of life out in the marsh. Live oaks tunnel over the roads, the tide moves through the creeks twice a day, and you can still stand on the grounds of one of the first schools in the South built for freed slaves. Families out here have worked the same land since the end of slavery, more than 150 years on the same ground. And that's exactly what's being taken from them. As wealthy newcomers bid up land all along this coast, the taxes on these old family places climb right with it. And because so much of this land got handed down for generations without formal paperwork, a single unpaid tax bill, sometimes under $1,000, can put a family's home on the courthouse auction steps. To an outsider with money, St. Helena can look like an undiscovered paradise. But buying your dream out here can mean becoming part of the very thing erasing one of the last living cultures on this coast. Some decisions are about more than a view. If this is the kind of honest look you wish somebody had given you before you started searching, that's the whole reason this channel exists. Subscribe, and you'll get one of these every week. Now the final 4, because the catch only gets harder from here. Number 4, Edisto Beach, might be the single most beautiful place we set foot today. No high-rises, no traffic lights, just a quiet barrier island wrapped in maritime forest, with a wild beach where whole bleached dead trees stand right in the surf. People fall for Edisto the first afternoon. Then they look closer. The whole town sits inside a federal flood zone, which isn't a warning, it's a fact stamped right on the map, and the rising sea is working into the island's own roads and drainage. But the thing that quietly ends the most retirement dreams here has nothing to do with the water. Edisto is so far out that the nearest hospital is around 50 miles away, the better part of an hour by car. For a healthy 50-year-old, that's just an adventure. For somebody in their 70s with a heart condition, it's the whole ball game. The next town will sell you a house for almost nothing. You're about to see why. Number 3, Denmark, looks like an ordinary little railroad town, a quiet brick downtown and a couple of small colleges. The homes are some of the cheapest in the whole state, an unbeatable bargain on a fixed income at first glance. The reason the prices are so low isn't something you'd notice just driving through. For the better part of a decade, the city pumped a chemical into one of its drinking water wells that was never approved for it, while folks turned on the tap to brown water and were told everything was fine. The state says the water meets the standards now. But trust, once it's gone, doesn't come back easy, and you can still hear it when people there talk about their water. And there's a worse problem underneath that. The county has no hospital at all anymore. So the cheapest house on the list comes with a question no price tag can answer, which is what you're willing to live with. The next town is the saddest story of all, because it did everything right and still lost. Number 2 is Allendale, and to understand it, you've got to picture what it used to be. It sat on the main highway that carried half the country down to Florida, and for decades the motels and diners along that road did a roaring business. Then the interstate opened a few miles away, the traffic moved over almost overnight, and Allendale started to die in slow motion. Drive that old highway today and you'll see the bones of it. Motel after motel standing empty, roofs caving in, signs for businesses that closed before the owner's grandkids were born. It's one of the poorest counties in the state. You can buy a home here for less than the price of a used car, and that number tells you most of the story. The little hospital that's left can't do surgery or deliver a baby, so anything serious means an hour's drive toward Georgia. Allendale is a lovely old town, emptied out by a decision made on a map 60 years ago, which brings us back, at last, to number 1. The town with the live oaks and the 2 slow rivers. Its name is Nichols, and it sits in a low corner of the PD where 2 rivers run together. On a normal day, it's everything I described at the start. A tiny, peaceful, deeply southern place where a brick main street and a few churches make up all of downtown. And then the water came. When the first big hurricane stalled over the Carolinas, those 2 gentle rivers swelled until they swallowed the town. Nearly every single home, around 98% of them, took on water, and in one desperate night, rescuers pulled close to 150 people off their own roofs. The town picked itself up and rebuilt. And then, barely 2 years later, before the wounds had even healed, a second hurricane did the exact same thing all over again. After that, a lot of people just couldn't face a third. The pharmacy never reopened. Houses were bought out and torn down, and roughly half the people who lived in Nichols before the floods never came home. The 2 rivers that made Nichols so quiet and so beautiful are the same 2 that took it apart. The postcard and the catch were never 2 different things. So here's what I hope you take from all 10, because it's worth more than any single town on it. In South Carolina, beauty is never free, and the catch almost always comes down to one of about 4 things. First is the water, how close it sits and how high it can get. Then there's the hospital, and how far the real one is on the day you actually need it. There's the work, whether the town has any of it left, and there's the insurance bill that comes stapled to all that pretty coastline. Learn to spot those 4, and you can walk into any gorgeous little town in this state and find the catch yourself before a realtor ever brings it up. Now, not every beautiful town down here is hiding a heartbreak. There are places where the water stays put, the hospital's close, and the math works for a retiree on a budget. Those are the towns in the next video. Until then, take your time, look past the postcard, and go in with your eyes wide open.